Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Modeling it is everything when you have teenagers or even young boys and young ladies before you got preteen going on. I talked to my mother-in-law and she was talking about attitudes of certain children at certain ages and different things like that. And I said, oh yes, my sons started seeing preteen activity in the way they talked and stuff and going, oh my goodness, I thought I had a few more years. I was listening to a podcast called Erica Taught Me that my son Christopher introduced me to, and she was interviewing this guy, and I went back to try to find his name. I couldn't see his name, but they were talking about finances. But this was the interesting thing. He was talking about attitudes that he's had and a mentor that would follow him around for a full day. And the one thing he said, you talk too much. You're not listening enough to your clients, to your people. And he said, when it came to my children, I stopped trying to tell them what I wanted them to do, and I started specifically modeling what I wanted them to do, because at that age, it's caught more than it is taught by speaking. But so you want to model before them the attitudes and the things that you want them to do and be. So he said, when people would come in the room, and I was very taken back by this because I thought, I don't do this enough. There's times I do this wrong. You're going to feel this way too. But he said, when people would walk into the room for a meeting, he said, I would immediately stand up to greet them. And I had my children with me on many occasions. I wanted to make sure that they saw this. When people would say something to me, I would turn to them. I would say to them, I always tip well because it's important that I show respect for people and the job they do, so I tip well. He said, but when we would go to a hotel, I would say to them, we're not going to stay in that very expensive hotel because it costs too much money and it's not worth it. Instead, we would stay in a less expensive hotel because I was modeling to them where you should spend your money and where you should not spend your money, how you should treat people and how you should not treat people. And my wife and I, at the same time, were talking about this morning in our devotion. She was reading in Deuteronomy and I was reading in Ezra, and how we are to model to our children what they're supposed to do. And sometimes I did that, sometimes I did not. But speaking to them often overwhelms them. Here at the end of Moses' life, he starts telling them all the laws that God has given him for them. And then he said, go get Joshua, he's getting ready to die and all this. And here's the interesting thing, but God tells him, he says, now listen, once you go, they're not going to do what you just told them to do, what I told you to tell them. Instead, they're going to go off, they're going to worship other guys, they're going to do all these things. I'm in the book of Ezra. It's King Cyrus who, several of the kings became believers in the God of the creator of the universe because the children of Israel were there in captivity and God would show himself. And it says that God used Cyrus to get the children of Israel back to Jerusalem to build the temple. And all of them didn't go, but he said, those of you who feel the need to go back and build, you can do this. And he sent a letter to the entire country and said, those of you who are of the Jewish faith that, are friends of theirs, if you want to do something, send them back with as much gold and cattle and things like that to prepare for the temple. And he goes through all these things, the items that God preserved, they released from their treasury because they would steal and pillage and steal from all the different countries they took over, sent them back with all the stuff they took out of the temple. Why am I saying all this? Well, what I'm saying is it's important that we model the way to react in crisis. We were talking about crisis and tough times and hard times, and it's not easy to do the right thing. But when we do the right thing, it is such a God thing. It is such a spirit thing for us to endure hardships and the things that the first century church had to do. But one thing the disciples did, one thing Moses did and Joshua, one thing that Ezra did and the different prophets is they modeled that they would follow God. We're not just telling you, we're going to do this. We're going to do this over here. And they would respond and they would lead. True leaders lead. What do we do as students? We model how to give, how to treat our spouses, how to treat our children, and how to do the things we're supposed to do and respond to other people. Oftentimes we get caught up in student ministry and trying to be cool or trying to be, awesome or laugh at things that students would laugh at. And some of that's fun and it's good as long as you do it in context and in the right environment. But it's also massively important that we model our actions about what we want our students to act like and do, because down the road, they may not do it right then, but down the road as they grow up, they will model the actions of the people that mentored them spiritually. I remember what Dr. John Maxwell said concerning leadership and mentoring. He said, don't have just one mentor in your life. He says, make sure that you have multiple people that are great people that you're using as models and mentors. He said, because every person has good points and bad points. And if you just have one mentor, you're going to get mostly all of his good and bad character because you're spending all of your time with one resource, one person. He said, instead, when you have 4 or 5 mentors, he said you can take away the good from all of them and not spend so much time with them that you're getting the bad parts of their character, because we all have them. And remember this phrase that we've said before, many people have said it, but I'll say it again to remind you, because if you're like me, I constantly need reminding. And that is this: we are the sum total of the 5 people we spend the most time with. We are the sum total of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Who are you spending time with? And who do you want to be like? I remember one of our discipleship girls who's in major ministry, and her husband's in major ministry, and we've talked about them before, but we won't talk about their names right now in this context. But she said, I loved when he would go to Bible study with this group of men because he would always come back home treating me better. Wow. When he would go to that Bible study, something about the character of all this group of particular men would make him better. So you're the sum total. Who are you spending your time with? And if you need to spend time with better people, there might be people in your life that you need to spend less time with because they're draining you, they're pulling you down. I'm not saying be snobby to people, but there's some people that don't really care if you grow spiritually. In fact, they'd rather you not and get less and less so that they can feel better about themselves. Some of those people you need to either cut out of your life, or you need to stop spending so much time with them. Maybe they're family members. You don't have too much of a choice, but you can spend less time, walk away from certain situations, and add that person in your life, or those people that will give you better, that are modeling better character, modeling better actions in life, whether it's financially, spiritually, mentally, socially, emotionally. You want those people so that they can add to your life, so that you can model those things to your children and to the students that you're working with and their families. You want people saying good things about you. The book of Proverbs is always talking about good character. You probably should read more in the book of Proverbs about those things. Jesus would talk about the people, that you're with. and certain types of people. He would say, don't be like these people. Instead, be like these people. And he would point out certain people. And it was, many times it was not the people you would think he would be pointing out. Many times it was not the religious leaders. Now, I hope that our spiritual leaders, I don't want to call them religious. Religion actually has a good connotation, except in context of how religion has changed us negatively because it's taken on human form as opposed to spiritual growth, which brings on a form of God in us. And so with this, realize that modeling is important. What you act like and how you respond, and especially in front of people you want to help their lives change for good, matters. So start modeling. Start thinking about what are some characteristics I want my children to grow up with? What are some characteristics I want my students to grow up with? How do I want to treat the people that I love so that they can see how to treat other people? All right, that's all I've got for today. Remember, all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to His purpose. So get out there and do the things that God has created you to do. Ephesians 2:10 will tell you that He has created in advance good works for you to do. Model it and live it. See ya next time on Youth Worker on Fire.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.